The Mount of Olives is an important biblical site, but it's also part of the disputed area known as East Jerusalem. CBN's Scott Ross visited a Jewish family living not far from here in a sea of Arabs. Some might call him a settler, but he says he's just resettling the mountain of history.
The Bible mentions the Mount of Olives many times in both the Old and New Testaments. It's the place where Christ will land when he returns to conquer Jerusalem.
What are we surrounded by?
Well, it's easy to understand that geographically because we are looking at the southeast corner of the old city of Jerusalem.
Right.
I visited Yishai Fleisher and his family who live in Ma'ale HaZeitim, here on the slopes of the Mount of Olives. Some call him a settler and say his community is a stumbling block to peace. But he says Jews have been here for thousands of years and he's not going to be bullied out of it.
Those are the walls that were rebuilt by Sultan the Magnificent, but those are built upon the ancient city walls of Jerusalem. We see the Temple Mount, where we know the two temples stood, and where Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac at the binding. And if we look a little more to the east, we see the magnificent Mount of Olives Cemetery, which has 180,000 Jewish graves. I call it the Mountain of History. It's got important Jews, our people's ancestral burial ground from 3,000 years ago.
And this ancient piece of Jewish history is located in the eastern part of the city, which many refer to as East Jerusalem.
These were lands that were actually taken away from Israel in 1948 by the Jordanian army, which was British-led and British-trained and British-armed. And in 1967, we liberated or captured these lands and returned back to places like this. And that's why it's always so funny to me when people claim that we don't have a right to be here, that we're on somebody else's land. I just point them to this mountain and say, well, look at it. It speaks for itself. You know, this is where our people have been for the last 3,000 years.
Fleisher says Jewish people purchased the land in the 1700s to expand the cemetery. The expansion didn't happen. Now, 100 Jewish families live in the secured complex of Ma'ale HaZeitim, built on that land. Children play within the compound in the mostly Arab neighborhood.
We live with Arab neighbors. These folks are all Arabs, Muslims, few Christians, but mostly Muslims. Some of them believing in the jihadist ideology that we don't have any rights here.
This next door neighbor is an Arab. There's an Arab. Are there contentions among you? How do you live with peace?
Instead of the word peace, I prefer a word called normalization. Okay? We are trying very hard to normalize our existence back here. We see ourselves as the indigenous returnees.
Fleisher says the compound, or those that live there, face weekly attacks, yet they hold on.
How many children have you?
I have two.
And you're raising them in this environment.
People say, you know, aren't you putting them in danger? And the first thing is to remember is that being a Jew is a dangerous occupation, always has been. And second thing, we're teaching them to be courageous in the face of bullies, which is a Jewish tradition, David versus Goliath tradition.
Right.
And that is not to let people push you around and not to let people erase your story and try to tell you that you don't belong in Jerusalem. I mean, there's no greater irony than to tell Jews that they don't belong in Jerusalem.
What would happen if Jerusalem were divided?
It's the progressive people who claim that it's a good idea to divide Jerusalem, and yet, what are you saying? Are you saying that we should take a city, build a wall down the middle, and divide it based on race and ethnicity, and move Arabs to one side and Jews to the other side? I mean, that's a vision of progress, to racially divide a city and build a scar-like wall down the middle of it? It's so regressive. We stand against dividing the city and dividing this land.
You would take exception to the word or the definition of yourselves as being settlers.
We are not settlers, we are resettlers. We are reclaiming our ancestral rights. And to create a narrative that we don't belong and that somehow we're foreigners in this land is a myth that's been created in order to delegitimize the Jewish people's right to this land.
How do you view the philosophy of land for peace?
It's actually a misunderstanding about the Middle East mindset. When you say, I'm willing to give my land for peace, what the Middle Easterner will hear is, here's my wife, take her, just don't hurt me. So when you say land for peace, you're actually giving up the most coveted thing here in the region, which is your land. And it just shows you to be a completely spineless, jelly-like creature, which with time will be destroyed. Every place that we leave, and that we abandon, and that we shrink away from, becomes our cancer. If it's South Lebanon, it becomes the home of Hezbollah. If it's Gaza, it becomes the home of ceaseless Hamas wars. 3 wars in 6 years. To make it in the Middle East, you have to be big, you have to be tough, you have to be a regional superpower. The message of Israel is one of tremendous opportunity for a better life.
How do we pray for you here? We're in the middle of it here.
One of the ways to pray for Jerusalem is to come here and go to the wall and go to the Temple Mount and talk to God and thank Him for the opportunity. Be part of the story in some way. We have to take it also from the realm of prayer and the realm of hope to the realm of action. And one example is that the United States of America does not recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. In fact, they don't even recognize Jerusalem as a city in Israel. Tell your countries, put your embassies in Jerusalem. What kind of disrespect is that to Jerusalem and to Israel and to the God of Israel and to the God of the Bible, that you don't even recognize Jerusalem as the renewed, reconstituted capital of the Jewish Commonwealth that we've all prayed and yearned for, the promises of the Bible.
Scott Ross, Mount of Olives, Jerusalem.